Okay, the next part of this little shindig in here is to actually do some brazing, okay? So the first thing with jointed copper is you got to make sure it's clean, okay? So when you get ready to braze it, take a few extra minutes, get some sandcloth, and get this stuff really clean, okay? Like a new penny right there, like that. Okay, and when it's nice and clean, do not touch it with your fingers, because finger oil is about the worst thing you can put on there, especially when you start soldering, okay? All right, we get that clean like that. Okay, this is the swedge in. Put this in here so it holds good.
Now don't forget to clamp down as hard as you can.
Well, if you do that, you'll crush the copper, right? Okay, firmly but gently, okay?
Just that it's held in there.
Okay, now, sill floss, this is what this is called. Like I said, it's a brazing rod, it's an alloy, okay? It's gotten rather expensive, so you don't want to waste it. You'll notice it has a flat shape to it, right? Now, the way I do this is, when I start heating this copper up, once I get the copper up to temperature, I take that flat brazing rod and I lay it right there on the seam where I want it to go, like this. And I just keep it in contact with it right there. When the copper gets hot enough, this will start to melt to it. I don't want the flame to melt that, I want the copper to melt that. If I put the flame on it, it'll melt all right, but it'll run all over the place. It's not going to bond to the copper. The idea is you want this to bond to the copper, okay? So what I do is, as it starts to melt, you'll see it start to liquefy, and I'm just going to kind of draw it straight across like that right there. Then I'll come over here and do the next part of it, and draw it straight across like that. That'll give you a nice beveled edge. Okay, it's called a fillet edge. Okay, you don't want too much metal on there, but you want enough to get that nice smooth, like a ramp type between the two pieces, okay? It looks good, it's very strong, it'll hold pressure, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and light this bad boy off, okay? What's the first thing I got to do here?
Check your
hoses.
Hoses are good.
Make sure the valves are off.
Okay, valves are off. Okay, why a half?
Safety.
Right? Okay.
Safety first.
Okay.
Open your nozzle. 5.5.
Okay.
5.5.
5 right there. 5 and survive, right? Now what?
Open that all the way up.
Okay, all
Turn
the
it
way.
back a quarter. Take the pressure off the
Relieve
stem.
pressure on the stem, right? Okay, all right. What am I setting this one to?
10 pounds.
Okay. Be careful where you point it, right?
Right.
It's oxygen. All right. Close that. All right, we're ready to go, right?
Good.
Okay. Put the hose underneath the table, okay? Try not to have any kinks in it either, like this right here, okay? That way I don't trip over anything with a 1200-degree torch in my hand. Oh! Could be a bad day, huh?
Nobody's trying to stop me. I was trying to catch you.
Believe me, if I start to fall with this in my hand, I'm going to look to see who's behind me.
You're gonna hit
Oh,
the
there
ground.
you are.
I'm behind you right now, so I wouldn't even do that. I'd just drop it. You're gonna stumble to your right now, huh?
Yeah. All right.
Cindy's gonna
I
hit the hose.
I like to keep one of my feet kind of touching the hose so I know where it's at. I don't want to stand on it, but I just like to feel it so I know where it's at so I don't trip myself, okay? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and light this thing off, okay?
Were you looking for the hat?
Notice that first time, huh?
Shit's bright.
Yeah, don't stir for too long.
It's about 1,200 degrees.
Yes, it is. Neutral flame, right? Okay.
Yep.
All right, so when we start heating this stuff up here, first thing you want to be careful of is remember that this is 1,200 degrees, okay? Never lay this down on the table when it's lit. If you're working on this, you want to look at a joint and you pull it off, don't be pointing over this way while you're doing it so you don't fry his ass over here, okay? That happened in one class a while ago. The guy was not too happy about it, I'll tell you. Okay, now when we start heating this up, what you want to do is apply heat first to the male end. That's this part right here that plugs into that right there. That's the male end. We're going to heat that up to a dull cherry red. Okay, when it gets dull cherry red, that heat will transfer to the inner side of the female side right here. Once this becomes dull cherry red, we move it down to the female side and we keep it on that side at that point, because this is going to follow the heat. Okay, and when I move it down to the female side, that's when I'm going to start laying this brazing rod right on the joint right there, and it starts to liquefy. As it does, I will pull that off and create that joint I was telling you about. Now, one thing about this, when you start heating this up, okay, don't pull the torch off and look at it and let it cool down. Because when you do that, you get oxides in the air start bonding to the copper as it cools down, and it creates this black, crusty, hard to deal with crust on it, okay? And you can't get a good braze job if you get a lot of that on there. So what you want to do is, if you want to look at it, right, you braze it and go, is that enough? Move it back, but keep the heat cone pointed at the copper to keep it warm. That prevents the oxides from bonding to the copper, okay? Now, if you want to come back in and work on it again, you just move the heat back in again, and you go ahead and do what you got to do. Because once you pull the heat off of it, those oxides start to bond to that copper, and you're going to have a problem right there, okay? All right? So let's go ahead and do this. So we're going to go ahead and heat this male end up first here, okay? Dump some heat in. Now get close to it. A lot of people are standing out here like this. Get close to it, put some heat on it, okay? Get this a dull cherry red like that, okay? Now move it to the female side. Keep the heat on it. Now we're just pressing that rod on it to make it start to liquefy to this. Okay, now we got a little bit of a blob right there. Now, if you get a little bit of a blob like that, somebody give me a rag down there, okay? Now, I'm going to keep the heat on it so I can get to that, okay? Because if I pull the heat off, somebody took my rag. Give me a rag. That's one of those buckets. Hurry up. Get it wet.
It is.
Okay. So while it's still wet, with that little blob right there, okay?
Wipe it off.
What I can do is I snatch it off. Now be careful here, because when I do this, it's going to kind of come off behind me here, okay? I did better this morning. That's not my best one, but sometimes shit happens.
Gets the job done.
Shit happens. I can do better next time. Okay, that's good enough for now. Okay, make sure you edit that. Now, while it's still hot, you shoe shine that thing and pull off some of that oxide there. Okay, if that happens, then you just go ahead and pick it up here. Okay. Dunk it in the water. Enough water in the bucket, man.
You need some more?
Yep. Right, a little bit now. Alright, let's see how this looks. Okay, so what we want to do here is we want to get this beveled edge going right here, okay? Where's my sand cloth?
You dropped it.
Behind you. On your foot. Other foot.
Half foot.
Okay, now you see how that looks right there? You got kind of a beveled edge right there. Your thumbnail should drift right across that right there, okay? And what you don't have is a lot of excess brazen rod on there. Now this side here where I first started got a little hot. For some reason it wasn't bonded.